So I'm a member of r/fantasy, where we have this fantasy bingo every year, which is great fun. So this year I didn't fully complete it because I've been through a bit of a reading slump, but let me give you a review of the books I have done. First, in the Knight and Paladin Square, I read Oath of Gold by Elizabeth Moon. This is book 3 of the Deed of Pax Cenarion. I enjoyed Pax's story very much. It's a very 80s, early 90s story in that terrible things happen, but there's hope and value to be found in the terrible things that happen. In other words, these terrible things kind of happen for a reason, which is an attitude that was very, very prevalent in the 90s, which I personally remember as a pretty optimistic time. The whole series of Deeds of Pax Cenarion, especially Book 2, Divided Allegiance, and Book 3, Oath of Gold, is also one of the best depictions of PTSD I've ever seen, including how hard it is to overcome PTSD, which makes sense as I believe Elizabeth Moon is herself a veteran of combat. So I highly recommend the books if you're looking for a great Knights and Paladins series or a book dealing with PTSD. All right, then in the Hidden Gems category, we have Murdoch's Web by Chalky Clark. This is a science fiction self-published book with a giant spider as the main character, who's also an asteroid miner. Despite my personal arachnophobia, I really liked this story. Murdoch was a fun, likable protagonist, and there's a human character that shudders right alongside me whenever she interacts with them, and that made the hairy spideriness much more bearable. Then in the Square, published in the 80s. Pax would have counted here, but the rules are no repeating authors, so I didn't fulfill the Square. High Fashion, I also didn't manage to fulfill this one. Then Down with the System. Here I read Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. I really enjoyed this series, and perhaps it is fitting that it was the series that really broke my reading slump, because I bounced off this series in 2022 when my reading slump was actually getting started and I stopped reading. This time around, it completely broke the slump, which was great. It is an amazing series overall that deals with a kind of French Revolution style of books, and I did a full review for it, which you can check out on the blog of my website down below. I didn't do a book in parts, but I did do Gods and Pantheons, where I did Shadow of the Gods by John Gwayne, which is a reread in preparation for reading the rest of the series, which is now out. I enjoyed the reread even more than the original read, although I will say that Thought Cage, which the author uses in place of describing a mind, remains incredibly annoying. It is, however, a really, really fun high fantasy story set in a world inspired by a post-Valhalla Viking society. It's great. Then, last in a series, I read Ark of Aside, The Toll by Neil Shusterman, and despite the fact that I virulently disagreed with the themes of the whole series, I still recommend Ark of Aside as a series. I think it's a very interesting exploration of what would happen if humans discovered how to beat death in all its forms. I have a full spoiler-filled review for all 3 books coming up on this channel. So, in this little snippet video, I will just say that book 1 and 2 were great, following the story mostly through the eyes of 2 characters who are either becoming or are new scythes, people who glean, murder, other human immortals to keep the population under control / provide some uncertainty and purpose for people's lives. And this is part of the philosophical underpinning I disagree with. But anyway, for more, subscribe and you'll get my full spoilery reviews. Then for a book club or read-along book, my Discord book club read The Maleficent 7 by Cameron Johnston. It was great fun, but ultimately the book tried to take itself too seriously and had way too many characters, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped to. It's kind of a spoof take on the Magnificent Seven. Then on Parents, in the Parents block, the Powder Mage trilogy would have counted here, but again, no repeating authors, so there we are. Epistolary. For this, I read The Post-Mortal by Drew Majory, which is told as a series of blog posts, or diary entries if you prefer, interspersed with news articles and interviews and the like. It tells the story of when the world discovers the cure for aging and all the chaos that follows on this discovery, as seen through the eyes of the narrator, John Farrell, who gets this cure for aging and thus stays his age of 29, I think, throughout the whole story. It was a very interesting and more realistic exploration of what might happen if we discovered the cure for aging, although I'm not sure I agree with the author about how events would unfold. I have a little bit more hope in humanity. I think we could cope with not aging. But the book itself was still very interesting, and I recommend it if you're looking for that kind of exploration of immortality. Published in 2025, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I know The Devils has gotten heat online for being too derivative or whatever, but I really enjoyed it. I liked all the characters, and I thought the ending was very typical of Abercrombie. It's not that all people are monsters, it's that the systems we've built turn most people into monsters, because only the monsters win in these systems. And that is all about Abercrombie. Author of Color, Neal Shusterman would have counted here, but I used him in ending a series instead. Small press or self-published books. In this category, I read Death on Luna by Terence M. Davis. This is a Sarvit Machado story, and it is written in that old kind of noir detective style. It's a lot of fun. Machado is an investigator who owns a ship called Nineball and lives in orbit around Jupiter, which is also where he kind of investigates things in order to make money. The science in the series is a lot of fun, very realistic. The investigation is fantastic, and the style is very nostalgic for those who like that noir style of investigation. Biopunk, I didn't read. Elves and Dwarves, Pax would have counted here, but, no repeating. Same for LGBTQIA protagonist. She is Ace, I think. The author never comes out and explicitly says it, but Pax Sonora certainly comes across as Ace. I didn't read 5 short stories, and I don't think anything I read counts as Stranger in a Strange Land, Recycle, Cozy, or generic title. I did do Not a Book, and for this I did Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and as an adaptation of the Dunk and Egg stories, this made me really happy. It was a great exploration of knighthood in the Seven Kingdoms by George R. R. Martin, and how those who hold power often fall shy of honor. It was really, really well done, and I will be doing a review episode on this channel on kind of the themes explored in there. So that was my R Fantasy bingo. I hope you enjoyed those quick reviews, and I will see you soon for a more comprehensive review where we dive into the themes of Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman.